Dr. Lennart Nacke. Welcome to the podcast. Why was academia the right choice for you?
Thanks for that question. And again, very happy to be here. The right choice for me was something where I would be my own boss, I guess. Not that I have a problem with authority, but in general, I really enjoy being the master of my own time, my own work, and having the flexibility to work where I want and with the people that I want, in the environment that I want. Now, of course, that takes a little bit of time to get to that place, but this was the ultimate goal when I first entered academia, that I wanted to have this kind of freedom to really work on the things that interest me with the people that I care to work with.
Absolutely. So I want us to take a step back into your educational background and what led you to this path.
So it's actually a funny story. I began this path by really thinking I want to combine the interest that I had for arts with this idea of technology. I was very aware in my in my late teens, early 20s, when I started my undergrad, I was very aware that there is a change happening. Like, computer science was just really taking off. There was a change happening towards communications and everything being more computer focused, computer based. So doing something with computers was kind of the original idea that drove me towards studying something that was at its heart really computer science, but it was called computational visualistics. So it was very visual focused computer science with some humanities courses thrown in and some filmmaking and other stuff. So I could still like keep my creative side while also having to do matrix operations and the boring math stuff that you do in a computer science curriculum. So yeah, that's kind of what drew me in, was sort of this idea of I can hopefully work with modern technology, but still keep sort of an artistic side to myself. Because originally, I think, we all kind of want to be like a film star or an artist or things like that. And, I had some of these discussions with my parents. They're like, this is not the right path. You should do something that also makes you money and that, advances your mind as well. So those were kind of the things that came out of early discussions during my childhood. And so, obviously parents always want you to be a doctor, lawyer, or astronaut, I guess, maybe if they're flexible. But yeah, so then I didn't always want to be a professor. I just wanted to work with technology. And during my undergrad, I kind of came onto this track that games started to be really a thing. Like, I wanted to actually go into movies and work on movie technology, industrial light and magic, this kind of stuff. But then like halfway through my undergrad, where I did my undergrad in Germany, was like a combined bachelor's and master's. So I didn't actually like stop bachelor's and then go master's, but it was like right into the master's. Sort of in the middle there, I decided, okay, I want to do something with games. And then that really became my focus for, I'd say, the first 10 years of my career, where I really doubled down on that research.
Yeah, that's incredible. And so double down on that. And then after this combined bachelor's and master's degree, you went into a PhD program.
Yeah, so it was kind of weird because I had this sort of interdisciplinary degree. I wasn't really looking for a traditional computer science job, but I would have wanted to do something like in the video game industry or something like that. Now, the thing is, in the video game industry, I would have been overqualified with that degree almost, because, they like to hire right out of high school, and like, if you want to work as a game designer or level designer or something like that. And so this kind of not became an option for me, because I, at that point, when I had my master's, also became really interested in psychology and cognitive science and like really understanding how humans work. So I had all this knowledge of technology, but now I'm like, but what about humans with technology? And that's what really drew me to my PhD, where I switched more into human-computer interaction and sort of the human reflective side of things, as in like, how does technology impact humans? And then, of course, in this case, I did a lot of studies with electroencephalography and physiological measures in terms of impact on video games. I was studying the fun of video games as a big topic in my PhD.
Yeah. Absolutely. That is really interesting. And so, from wanting to maybe work in the video game, movie industry, the entertainment industry,
Yeah.
really, you ended up as an academic.
hmm
What changed in between?
Yeah, it's again a very interesting thing that during the PhD, I obviously started doing the things that you do in a PhD, publishing papers, working on experiments, understanding. Well, during my PhD, I was very much understanding quantitative aspects of data analysis. I was very quant focused during that time. Later, during my postdoc, I switched over to qualitative and then really became a mixed methods researcher over time. And yeah, so it was very interesting for me to be able to generate factual knowledge and a deeper understanding of the impact of these new technologies on humans. And while I was very focused on games at the beginning, I then broadened out, and then in the recent years it all became about AI, because I think that's a huge change in terms of like how we interact as humans and like what's even possible and what it does to our mind as well. So it's really just kind of understanding the impact of technologies on humans and how it enhances or changes us, makes us better, or also has some dangers, in terms of how it influences the social aspects of our life and things. So it was really a deep interest in the subject matter that drove me to this. And then, not during my PhD, but after, when I became a professor, at that point, I guess I was already lost to academia. But then it really became about two things. I really loved this idea of I'm starting essentially what's a company, because like running your own research group is kind of like starting a company. So it's a little bit of that entrepreneurial spirit. And then on the other hand, I really liked writing. Like I think the PhD kind of got me hooked on writing. I just loved the process of putting words on paper and like just squeezing it out of me, because back then you really had to squeeze it out of you. There was no ChatGPT and other helping tools. You really had to like double down on that.
Yeah.
So that got me really interested in writing. And then, over time, this kind of became from a side project, as in like, I like writing, but I really like the research too. Like, I really like writing, but I also do the research now. So it's like I'm almost switching more towards focusing on writing these days.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that with me. I think you brought up something about having an entrepreneur spirit, especially if you are going to be a professor that starts your own research group. I think that's such a good point, because I really hadn't thought of it as an entrepreneurial endeavor. Recently, I was actually reading a book by Elena Horowitz, who is a professor at Tulane. She's a sociologist, and she wrote a book called The Entrepreneurial Scholar. And most of the book is her talking about how academics have generally not thought of themselves as entrepreneurial, but really, when whether you choose to work in academia or not, there's an entrepreneurial aspect to knowledge creation, because that's what academics tend to do, is create knowledge where it's never existed before. And you need self-efficacy, you need to come up with your ideas, you need to manage. If you have a research group, you have to manage the team. So it's really entrepreneurial. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. Now, I don't know about, I think you're in Canada, correct? Yes, Now, one of the complaints, maybe a complaint. The complaints that people have discussed with me is it's hard to find a tenure track position nowadays. And so for somebody that wants to do this in 2025, it's hard, but it's not impossible. What would you recommend that they do?
Yeah, so you're right. It really doesn't become any easier. Specifically, recently, the market, I think, is getting more and more competitive. And so really, and I do this a lot in my own coaching program, is where I'm trying to help people understand the requirements, because they keep on going up every year. So it used to be, that it was enough to just do a couple of papers, have an interesting topic, and then eventually get hired just on the merit of research alone.
Yeah.
Now, as most alt-ACs, or that entire alt-AC community, I guess, is built around that, a lot of people for a lot of people that bubble is bursting, and they still like they have all the requirements, but they still cannot get a job, or maybe they don't even want the job at the end of their PhD because they could see all of the downsides and the hardships that come with being a professor, and it's definitely not as rosy as it used to be, for sure. And so the recommendation that I would give people is to really understand their field and work through the requirements that are necessary, first of all, in terms of publications. So it's not enough to just publish, but it's important, ideally at the beginning of the PhD, to identify the highest quality venues and then really try to get 1 or 2 papers in these highest quality venues. This can take you years, of course, because you have to understand what the standards are to get into those and what the reviewers are looking for. And then, the rest you still publish, and the rest might not be at the high tier venues, but you got to have at least 1 or 2 papers at those highest tier venues to make your mark. It's not enough just to have any publication anymore. And then on top of that, that's still not enough to get you the job. On top of that, the actual thing that gets you in is networking. So a lot of people don't really talk about that, and it's kind of, everyone tries to tell you it's just based on your merits alone, but it really isn't. It is really very much about who you know and how you interact with them. And so what I recommend in my field, and I know this is not true for all hard sciences, and other fields it might be more difficult, but if you're in a field like social science or computer science or some of these fields that have conferences and networking events attached to it, to go to these, even though the cost might be high. Try to find the ones that are local at the very least that you can attend. Usually each country has like a local equivalent of the big international event that's attached to it. And then go to these and network at these events. Try to at least get a poster in or something that gives you sort of your ticket or your reason to be there. And then really the goal is not to just network and shake hands. I know this can be hard for people that are more introverted, but also to really try to get collaborators. Because if you do this like early on, let's say second year of your PhD, and you get those collaborations going, you might end up collaboratively authoring a paper. And again, I know in some fields that's not a thing that people collaboratively author, but if you're in a field where you collaboratively author a paper, this is a good idea to collaboratively work on a paper, because this is like a huge project that you're doing together. And this will give you street cred, essentially. This will give you an in with some of these people. Now, you don't want to collaborate with just anyone, but envision what your dream institution would be. Maybe it's Harvard, maybe it's Stanford, maybe it is just, a North American institution, maybe it's a European institution. Maybe it is anywhere else in the world. Maybe you have a specific preference for a country. Maybe there's an institution in New Zealand that you really want to be a part of. Something like that, right? But set a goal for where you can see yourself going in after the PhD, if you want to stay in academia, and actively seek out collaborators that are in that space that you want to be in, and really start engaging them. This is actually something that I did before my postdoc. Funny enough, my story was I organized a panel with my then future postdoc supervisor. I invited them on a panel, and I actually, during that panel, made a connection between them and an industry person. And so I already brought value in there. It wasn't just me like, okay, I want to sort of leech off your greatness or whatever, but here, I'm inviting you to this panel. I know this other industry person. I'm bringing both of you together in my panel, which is great value right away. And then I get to know them, I get to network, and then half a year later, I basically had the postdoc ready to go, and it was a warm in, essentially, for me. It wasn't a cold introduction. And then during my postdoc, I kept continuing with this networking work. Interestingly enough, the job that I have now, I actually organized a conference here in this exact location a year before I got hired. But I didn't even know that I was going to apply it to Waterloo at that point. I just ran a gamification conference in 2013 in Waterloo. And then, I think 2 years later, I was actually in that same office hired. It was interesting. Yeah.
So what I'm hearing you say is that it's not enough to just go through your PhD program anymore.
No.
You have to be intentional about the relationships you build. You have to put yourself out there, right? And this is something I've been telling academics for a while. You have to put yourself out there. And so, like you said, for some people, the word networking is hard for them, like even that whole action of it. I'm a bit of, I have an extroverted side to me, so it's not a problem for me. It looks like you are too. And so you have some side of you that's probably, or maybe, do you consider yourself an extrovert?
So I used to be more introverted, but I think definitely, like, if you do the ENTJ or whatever, I think I'm ENTJ. I was INTJ and then it's ENTJ.
Yeah.
So if you do these
I think
tests,
it shifts a little bit as we mature, right? I think it shifts a
exactly.
little bit. Yeah. So for the people that are introverted that are listening to this, I think you still have power, right? You still have power within your introversion. You don't have to go be best friends with everybody. That's one of the things I learned. It's just a matter of positioning yourself in the right place. I like something that you said, though. You said if you want to, for instance, if you want to be at an Ivy League institution, then be intentional about networking there. Right? If you know you want to be, like you said, somewhere in New Zealand, then be intentional about networking in that direction. So for you, you organize the conference, you talked with people. What else? We published papers. What else can you be doing? I know
Yeah.
you are very active on LinkedIn, for
That
instance.
was not
That
until
was
much later. Like I
on.
was already sort of,
Right.
I was already tenured at the time I decided
Okay.
to. So this is like a whole different season of my career that I'm in now, where I'm just
Right.
like almost like mid to post academia, where I'm like really embracing the entrepreneurship side that I've enjoyed as like part of running my research group. And now I'm like building these coaching programs, like building my solopreneurship and all that stuff. But this didn't happen until I actually had tenure. So then I finally like looked beyond, because I was at a point where I'm like, okay, I've achieved like all this academic stuff. This was nice, but what else is out there? And then it's like, well, you could also run a business.
Yeah, and there's a lesson there too, right? There's a lesson there too that you can use your skills in different directions. You don't have to just confine it to academia. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But to your first point about like what else can you do other than like running a conference, than doing these networking things. So I also have an interesting story about a colleague that I met. Again, this is our biggest conference in the field. It's called CHI. This is Computer Human Interactions. It's like a short form for that. And so I met her there. I think we were both postdocs at the time, or maybe she was just finishing her PhD, and it was really funny. She was like a very, not extroverted, but like a very intentional person, I gotta say. So she was from Switzerland, and being in Europe, she's just like, but I want to like be in North America. I want to like have a career in North America. I want to go to the best, specifically in the field. So then she was all about, can you introduce me to this guy? Can you introduce me to that guy? So then like I used whatever I had to introduce her to these people, but then she also met other people that introduced her to more people. And she was very intentional that she wanted to do a postdoc at Harvard, because she knew if she got into that Harvard group, it would open the new doors. And so she really was super focused on that, got that networking done. And then what she did, like later she did a postdoc in Harvard, but she actually just did a summer visiting researchship. And this actually happens a lot in my group as well. I get a lot of people actually from Europe, that visit, recently also from Asia, that visit, come by for a summer research project for 4 months, visit my group here in Canada, and then we work on a specific project, usually paper project, a publication, and it gives them experience of being in the group. There's no strings attached. There's no funding attached. They usually bring their own funding. Usually, interesting enough, like this is something you might find out. If you're in a PhD program, there's usually either a big agreement of your supervisor, because they're happy that somebody else is supervising you for half a year as well. It's like a little bit less work for them. So they will usually actually fund you for this. And then on top of that, there's usually national programs that you can apply for that fund these exchanges, right? Like that are specifically giving you travel money to make this all work. So it's a really interesting way to get to know some other research groups if you're super intentional, is to say, hey, I want to do an internship there or a visiting research assistantship, and then just come work there for a month or even a couple of months. Usually most people say it's at least 3 to 4 months, because that's usually what you need for like a solid project. But even shorter, if you don't have the flexibility, or let's say you have a family or something like that, it's not as easy. Even if you just get in for at least a month, it already gives you exposure and so much networking with that research group. Because just think of it, it's like networking on steroids. You're not just networking with one person, you're now networking with their entire research group. So this is usually at least 6 to 7, sometimes 10, 15 researchers that are all aware of you, that you do the daily work with. And if you do that well, they will all remember you, and they all go into all these different directions. So now you have this mini network of people that you can then leverage when you apply for jobs. I think that's super helpful.
That is super helpful. Now, so and once again, I love something you said, which was just find out, go and ask about it, right? So the person that wanted was very sure she wanted to be in a North American institution. She kept on asking you to introduce her to key people. And sometimes that's, again, what people don't do is ask, right? Even if people say no, you ask, right? You have to pitch yourself. You have to believe in yourself enough to pitch yourself and ask. So that's really good. What do you think is the biggest misconception people like me have about academia?
I don't know. I don't know what your misconceptions are, Gertrude. But
anybody, what else? What are some of the biggest conceptions about academia that you think that you want to debunk?
Yeah, so maybe I won't take you. Maybe I'll take the alt AC community, because we're all like on LinkedIn on these social platforms, and we see those things that go viral. And we all know to go viral, you usually need to have a bit of a juicy take, like something that's a little bit controversial that people can disagree with, because that gets views and likes and whatnot. Yeah, and so some of the stuff that I see is really just like forget about it, like they're neglecting you, or it's just like it's all dark and it's like it's doomed, there's like nothing good about it, and it's just like overemphasizing the dark side of things. I'm not going to glorify working in academia. There's definitely days where I'm just like, I would be making twice my salary if I was in industry, and I might even be happier in some moments, because sometimes you do have to do really annoying admin work that is just not fun. And you just got to understand that. You got to understand what you're getting into. But I still meet so many scholars, again, through my coaching, through my own students. I meet so many scholars that are still invested and interested in building a career, and a lot of them are not strategic about it, right? So this is where I'm always, like when I'm coaching, when I'm doing these info things, I'm always trying to tell them it's all about your strategy. You gotta have a strategy. You can't just kind of reel into it. And I think it's partially because I kind of fell over and rolled into academia sort of ish. Like I wasn't as intentional. I was just like, this is good, I'm just gonna keep doing this. And then all of a sudden I had a PhD, and then this is good, I want to do more of that. And then, then it became a little bit more intentional, because then I met the postdoc, and then in the postdoc I was really like strategic. Okay, now I want to have a career here, so what do I need to do? And then I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's a lot of work for very little money. So the burnout is real, and those negative effects are real. Like that's definitely something that you have to be aware of, but you don't have to opt into that, right? Like it's not a requirement to burn yourself out just to get tenure. So I'm completely agreeing, some toxic environment exists, but this is not the usual. Not all academia is toxic. Not everything is like a male-dominated, slave-driving sort of environment. I think that probably was more the case in earlier years. I think these days academia has shifted, because academia itself is kind of struggling to stay alive, I think, because with the advent of AI tools, we're now seeing students like fudging their way through undergraduate degrees with the help of ChatGPT. My colleagues, and even myself at the beginning, we weren't ready on how to do the assessments, because all of a sudden the students had the superpowers and we had to catch up. And now we have to rethink how we do assignments, how we do everything, because we have to integrate the use of AI, because we can't just ignore that the students are using it, because they're all using it. And so we have to kind of, still maintain relevance while everyone has the most powerful tools in the world at their disposal to learn everything, right? Like, why would you go to a teacher when you have the super smart personalized AI system that just knows what you need and will teach it to you the way that works for you, right? So this is the challenge of academia, I think, right now, to kind of be like, okay, so how do we keep this thing going? How do we stay happy and interesting? And this is also for you. If you're listening to this podcast and you're thinking, I still want to be an academic, think about how academia is changing in the next 10 to 20 years. Don't think about how it was, how you've seen it, because I think this was also a little bit my mistake. I grew up in Europe. I saw European academia, and then my career is in Canada. So I'm now in North American academia. And yes, the work ethic, the respect levels, this is all very different in North America compared to Europe. In Europe, professors are pretty high up, well respected, and here it's, I think, more of a sort of a working environment. Like you get stuff done, you're teaching people, you're helping people, but there's less glorification than it is in Europe, or maybe in some parts of Asia, I think, where it's just like a more
I think a lot
hierarchical
of the
level.
world, in a lot
Yeah,
of in a lot of the world, you do have a glorification of professors in
yeah,
general. So it's a pretty common um,
yeah.
phenomenon.
But
Maybe not in North America, but
yeah,
definitely.
I think in North America it's a bit different. I think maybe at Ivy League schools it might be a bit different, but I don't think even then. I think even there it's like it's more of a because I think partially it's because of the high tuition, to be honest. And this is something I'm definitely not in favor of. Like, why the heck is there such high tuition in North America? As somebody
Yeah.
that has gone through academia in Europe and basically like worked in that system where there's no or low tuition, and there's like a respect, like more of a working respect for people working in academia. Everyone sort of has a job and treats it as a job.
Yeah.
This is a strange system where there is some exploitation going on with undergraduate, graduate students here that the whole North American academic system is built on. That really still confuses me. Like I know that this is just how it's built, but like why is it necessary to do it this way in North America when other parts of the world get by perfectly fine by having different funding mechanisms in place?
Yeah.
Something probably to think about. And this, I think, is interesting for yourself to think about if you want to join academia, to think about, do I want to be a North American academic where I will have to face the side of tuition, which might potentially influence what I can do because there might be more money, there might be more just more power maybe to do things? Or do I want to be in a more structured system in Europe where maybe there's slightly less money, but there is constant money, there's more guaranteed money, there's less like struggle to get these third-party funding mechanisms or whatever. So yeah, again, strategy, right? Like it's more, I think a lot of people in academia do not see this strategically because, and I get it, because they're so focused on getting the PhD done. Like we've been through this, right? Like the
Yeah.
process of finishing your PhD is really hard. It takes up most of your life, so you don't really have time for strategy. I think it's good
Yeah.
to remind yourself that the PhD is not the end. The PhD is the beginning of something else, and
Beginning of
it does
something.
make sense to look beyond that. Whether it is the route that you go, where you're kind of helping them to see beyond what's in academia and go a different route, or sort of what I do, where it's like, okay, you can also have a career in academia and be happy, and that's perfectly fine too.
Absolutely. That is so good. Thank you so much, Lennart. That was so, so good. So, we talked about the stress and sometimes the pressure that can be in academia. This is a personal question. How do you personally handle that?
Yeah, so I think I have the same problem that a lot of academics have, is that I'm a little bit of a workaholic. I'm just going to admit it. But the thing is, like, a lot of people are, right? So you eventually first of all is you have to acknowledge the problem that you work too much and that you actually like it in a weird way. So that's the first step. Like, just be honest about what your thing is and like, what you're dealing with here. And then, of course, if you have a family, if you have a relationship, a partner, just to kind of clear up with them what that means for your life and like how it all comes together, because at the end of the day you have to emphasize the things that are important to you and the people that are important to you. And so, like, for example, in my relationship, I put my partner first before I think about the other things. And this is just a matter of reflecting on it yourself and just being intentional about this again. I know this is sort of a trope that's out there, but one thing that I only recently, I wish I would have started that when I was a PhD student, was journaling. I know this is something that a lot of people suggest, but it takes a little bit of practice because nobody likes to write something down first thing in the morning and last thing at night. But it does help you. It is really something, even if it's just little things that you're thankful for, things like where you set an intention for the day, things that help you kind of reflect on what you're actually doing instead of just letting it flow, I think can be really powerful. Because again, it doesn't have to be journaling. Journaling just is something that does work, but just taking time to reflect and not just taking time to do. I think a lot of us are caught in this hamster wheel of just doing the next thing, and then all of a sudden we're drowning in the sea of stuff. And the reason why we're drowning in the sea of stuff is that we're not hitting the brakes. So for me, the biggest thing that I ever did in my life was hitting the brakes, and I did this a couple of times. It's just like a reset. And maybe this is like my European background. I think like some of my North American colleagues really struggle with that because they have a different concept about vacation and taking breaks. Like it's just like frowned upon to take a vacation. I'm like, no. Like in Europe, we take like a month vacation.
Yeah, I
in the
know,
summer.
right? In Europe, people are definitely more open to that. One of the things I was going to say that I see some of that changing, though. I see more people advocating for, like I, for instance, recently started telling people, if you have paid time off, why don't you take it off, right?
Yeah,
because
exactly.
you are right. There is some guilt around, but then it's called paid time off or leave for a reason. It's yours, really.
Exactly.
So take some time off.
Yeah,
There,
take some time off and like also take mini breaks even like if you struggle so much to take like a chunk like a week off, just take an hour a day to walk in nature without your phone and use that as a reflection. That is a first start, but you got to give yourself some me time. If you don't have me time, you're going to get lost in everyone else's time.
You're going to get burnt out. What are some lessons in leadership that you think have made you a successful academic?
I'm going to start with the simplest one, which is and this is, I don't know if it's leadership or if it's like personal development, but the biggest unlock for me was to understand that email is just somebody else's to-do list. That's the biggest, like once you get that, you see email differently. It's literally not about getting to inbox 0. This is such a silly concept, but to understand that if somebody sends you an email, that's their to-do list, that's their task, right? Like, so treat it like that and don't think you're gonna have to complete everybody else's to-do list at the end of the day. That's just a silly concept. So once I understood that, then sure, at the beginning you get complaints. People like, why aren't you answering my emails? Or like, why are you dealing with it like that? But you just have to be honest to yourself that, okay, you're gonna pick out the things that you wanna do. You're gonna set a time for when you do these things, and that's just that. And specifically once you start being a prof, this is just insane. Like universities send you so many emails about so many things that do not matter.
It's everywhere though. It's not just universities. It happens in industry too. Yeah.
Okay.
So I have so many emails too. But I absolutely agree with you. Is like when I understood that this is not my agenda for the day. Because one thing that would happen to me would be like I would check my email. I'd be like, oh, this is going to take me 5 minutes to respond to, but then it takes you 30 minutes because somebody just asked you for a document you haven't worked on in 6 months, and you're trying to find that document, and it takes you another 20 minutes, and then now your mind is completely off of the project you were working on. Exactly. So I told myself, like I don't have set times, but I don't check my email for like a few hours at a time. I'll have like 2-hour chunks of time to focus, and I don't check the email at that time, and then I usually will respond to emails towards the end of the day. But even when people send me a message, like they will send you the email, then they'll send you another chat that said I sent you an email. I'm like, oh God, I will get to it. But
I've experienced that too.
Right. You're so right though.
This specifically happens when you do, like I'm an associate director here for graduate studies. So when you work with admin level responsibilities at the university, this absolutely happens because for the administration, usually things need to happen quickly on their timeline, but that's not my timeline. Just like making that understanding clear. And usually it's best done in like a one-to-one, like a personal discussion, just kind of saying, you don't need to send me a message that you've sent me a message that you've sent me an email, because now I have like 3 things from you to deal with, and that's not very productive. I will get to it, at that scheduled time during the day, and that's okay. So that's one of the. I got 2 more things that I wanted to cover. The other thing, and you might have heard this before. I've taught this as well. I think it's kind of stemming from this concept of how to do task lists, and the idea is essentially that you want to do the biggest thing at the beginning of the day. So I like to, now that I'm a creator, I guess you call them, right? Like now that I do a lot of these creative work and like building stuff, I like to do that in the mornings. So I like to schedule not before lunch. I like to not schedule any meetings. I like to really focus on creative work, on productive work, on getting stuff done. This doesn't always work. Sometimes you've got Australian collaborators that are in a different time zone, and then you gotta make time in the mornings to have those meetings. But for me, usually that's the biggest thing, to get the biggest thing done in the morning and then do the other things, and really just try to get one thing off your plate first thing. Before you do emails, before you do anything else, just don't do any of the communication stuff until you have that thing done, and then do the other stuff. I think that really made me way more productive, like seeing it as got to focus on the big thing first and then doing the other things later. So that was really key for me. And then the other thing is just in terms of leadership or people management, that was really important, is when you work with, this is something nobody trains you for, when you work with people, you all of a sudden you're a people manager, which means you need to manage relationships and deal with people in a way. And one of the, there's lots of things that you have to keep in mind for doing that. But one of the easiest things to keep in mind when you're like a fresh professor and you're just getting started is to try and always praise them in public. Always encourage your students in public, mentor them in public in a good way, like all of the positive stuff. And if you have something that they didn't do right or that they did wrong, is to try and schedule a one-on-one, privately tell them what happened, make them understand the concept here, but don't do it in the lab meeting, don't do it in front of a superior or something like that, but just do it in a one-on-one meeting. That goes a long way. They will feel more protected and more at ease if you're kind of having these conversations in private. This is something that specifically at the beginning I had to remind myself, and even sometimes these days, like when I'm like catching myself, I'm about to criticize, I kind of have to be like, okay, no, let's curb this and be like, let's schedule a meeting, let's talk about this. And it's just much better for the interpersonal dynamics if these things are not done in public, because they can really damage some of these relationships.
Absolutely. That's a really good point. Thank you so much. I think it's intriguing that as professors, you are required to mentor students and lead students, but we don't really have training on how to mentor, leadership. We don't have those. So I think it's really admirable what you are also doing to help professors like have these skills so that they can lead in a way that is helpful to future generations. If people want to find you and chat with you about their academic ambitions, where can they find you?
Yeah. So they can find me, first of all, just by Googling my name. It's unique enough that you'll probably find a lot of my stuff on the web. But of course, my first name, Lennart, Lennart, Nacke, Nacke.com is my website and my weekly newsletter. I highly recommend you subscribe to that newsletter. I put a lot of work into that every week. To make sure that I provide a lot of value for free to people that are interested in academic writing, in career strategies, even in AI generation. I cover a lot of that stuff there too. And I make it all available for free to subscribers. And then on my website, there's also my courses and other offers available there. So if you are interested in that, you can find all of that by coming off of my website. And you can also find me on social media, either by searching for Lennart Nacke or by looking at my older moniker that is Academic, Acagamic. I'm trying to change that at some point, but I kind of stuck with that for a long time.
I will make sure to leave all these links. Thank you so much, Dr. Nacke. This was such a great conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Gertrude. That's awesome.
Absolutely. Let me